So let's go ahead and get our discussion started. It's a very fascinating book and very fascinating insights from Dr. Michelle Harper. She is based in Philly, an emergency room doctor who's worked in a number of roles in that space, in that profession. And she captures a lot of the spirit of that in this book. This is actually an excellent read, The Beauty in Breaking. And so we're going to discuss that and get the author's perspective on it, what prompted her to write it in the first place. And we're being joined by Dr. Michelle Harper. And this is New York Times bestselling. So please, like me, get a copy of it. Dr. Harper, how are you doing this evening?
I'm good. Thank you so much. And it's wonderful to join you here in Philadelphia. Citizens, everyone tuning in. It is a delight. So thank you.
No, it's a pleasure to see you this evening, despite everything that's going on these days. But, you know, one of the things that strikes me about this story, about this memoir is, you know, we always, when we think of professionals or when we think of people and individuals in the medical profession, right, or in health-oriented professions, we think of them or we perceive them as unbreakable, right? But, you know, you're showing how a profession like this and also some of the struggles, some of the challenges that you were dealing with in your life, you know, medical professionals deal with challenges too. Talk about that. Talk about what prompted you to write this memoir in the first place.
You know, what prompted me to write it was I wanted to explore journeys of healing and transformation, because in life there will always be challenges. They're just going to be. That's part of the feel of it. And I wanted to look at, well, then what happens? How do we handle that? And how do we come through it? I mean, it's a memoir for anyone who hasn't read it yet. I talk about some of the challenges I faced growing up in an abusive home with a father who was a batterer, and how I heal from that. And because I feel like there's always the possibility to become more resilient through the challenges. I never want to romanticize trauma because that's sick, but looking at it honestly and confronting it with courage. And you know what's interesting? I couldn't have planned I couldn't have planned any of it because I've never written a book before. So I didn't know what it took to get published, if any, how it would land in this public space, who would read it. Didn't plan the timing, but I think that, you know, it launched last summer. So what was happening then? We were starting in the thick of the pandemic, Black Lives Matter. I mean, just so much on the health front medically, and then the social issues that have always been there, we haven't really addressed. So in that way, I think the timing was really interesting because we were open as a society, I feel, to have these discussions, seeing how we were all being brought to the brink in different ways. And in this space where we're thinking, okay, so now what do we do?
Yeah, you know, I do notice we are having this moment. We've had this pandemic moment, a moment of about, you know, where we're reflecting on the toxicity in our politics, a social justice moment. One constant theme that carries throughout is we're becoming a little bit more accepting of discussing trauma or our own individual traumas, our collective traumas, historical traumas. And how do you, as you're working through, let's talk about the process as you're writing this book, how you're dealing with that trauma, or, you know, managing the reflection on that trauma while you're engaged in the writing process. And as a writer, I know that can be very difficult, just the writing process in and of itself, by itself. And this is the first time that you've written a book, a full tome like this. Talk about that trauma, that management of that trauma that you dealt with from the past, and then just the traumatic experience of writing a book.
Right. Well, the writing itself, I will say that I find writing to be quite cathartic. And I do write about some difficult experiences that I've had myself and that patients have had. For example, when I was writing about my divorce, for example, I mean, that was years ago now. So I had done a lot of personal work, whether it was coaching that I've had or just meditation, yoga. I've done a lot of work reflecting, reading different spiritual texts. So I thought I was good, just good. I could write it. So invariably I write most original writing like in the middle of the night with incense and ambient music in the background.
That helps.
Exactly.
Right.
It really helps. I mean, it's really a meditation. And what I found as I was exploring some difficult experiences, such as the divorce, it was a moment of reliving it. So any aspects of that I didn't fully address, where the universe would say to me, okay, you did such a good job. Like there's this one other aspect. It came flooding back and flooding through me. And there was a part in the book where I talk about, I know what I would say to him now, like that, and music, Whitney Houston would be playing in the background. I will always love you. And then I would start crying. And then I did. That's really what happened as I was writing it. Now, the beauty of it is also that then when I was done with that chapter, I was really done. Like I was good. It took the healing that much deeper. It was that much more expansive in that way. So yes, it was difficult. Whereas other chapters, for example, I might be writing about, and I had to take a break, even though I was on deadline, because now it was real. Now I was under contract for the edit, and I might not write for a week because I just needed that time and space to process. And I think that is a lot of an important part of self-care as well, knowing ourselves well enough to know when we need to take time and space, that it's okay. I mean, it's, I'm kind of a type A personality. So it's good to know when yeah, it's time to push and just go. And otherwise, when it's time to take space and step away so that we can process and heal. So it was all of that. So I've actually only good things to say about the writing process.
Where did you? I don't want to trivialize the title too much, but there's a lot packed into that title, the beauty in breaking. When did you see the beauty in breaking?
As
Like at what point did that sort of occur to you that there is, one would never think that there is a beauty in something as tragic as something breaking, something breaking with inside of us, or us actually breaking something physically. But so it's a very striking, it's a very profound title. And I'm just curious, like at what point, it may not be during the course of writing that book. Maybe it's in the course right before you wrote the book and you came to some realizations about your life story, about your journey, when you felt that, hey, you know what, there's a beauty in this.
Yeah. And it really has been along the way, along the way in my experiences. I'll say the title specifically, I speak in the introduction about and I'm going to apologize for mispronouncing this term. I apologize to everyone. But the Japanese art of kintsukuroi, or kintsugi, I think is the other term for it, where if pottery is broken, it is then repaired with an amalgam of precious metals, whether or not that's platinum, silver, yellow gold, because the thinking is that we want to highlight, we don't want to ignore what has happened to this vessel. It has been changed by the mutability of life, and we are going to repair it. That's true. And it is that much more beautiful for what it has come through. And I see humans, myself and other people, in that same way, that we do have some choice in how we repair ourselves. And that we can be that much more beautiful afterwards. And what I also feel to be very beautiful about that is, in making that decision to heal ourselves, then we can, if we choose, be a support structure for others who also want to heal. And then if we do that, we can uplift society.
We're talking, if you're just now tuning in, if some of you are just now jumping in, we're talking to, this is just a radio habit of mine, of course, we're tuning in. We're talking with Dr. Michelle Harper. She is author of her first book. It's her memoir, New York Times bestselling memoir, The Beauty in Breaking. And so that's by Dr. Michelle Harper. You should check it out. You should try it. And we're having a conversation with her as part of ongoing conversations that we have quite frequently here on the Philadelphia Citizen. I'm Charles Ellison. Doctor, so you go quite a bit into, you just explained to us as you're going through that writing process, you're writing this book, we're having this very major moment in history, and a confluence, a convergence of all these different tectonic shifts in politics and public health, and and also in race and racism. So you go into that about, you write, America bears many layers of racial wounds, both chronic and acute. And so, talk about, as you're going through these struggles, you're coming, you're recognizing, things about yourself, and you're recognizing many things about who you are as a doctor and as someone who's treating people. You also are recognizing some very ugly truths and realities about the American public health system. And so talk a bit about that, about the role of racism, realizations about racism, and how that plays into this personal journey that you're taking.
Right. And I see it in so many ways, and so many levels. One of the discussions I have in the book, which I think it just illustrates it nicely. It's very unpleasant, but illustrates it effectively, is a day I was working in the ER, and I heard commotion going on behind me as I'm at my workstation. And the police had brought in a patient who was under arrest, a Black man, and there were 4 officers who had brought him in chains. And they were telling the triage nurse that he swallowed bags of drugs, and they brought him here for us to get the bags of drugs out. And the resident I was working with, Lauren, I've changed all the names, obviously. Lauren, a white woman who's a resident, so she's my trainee, goes over and to find out what's happening. I'm hoping to diffuse the situation, although I wasn't terribly optimistic. And the patient, Mr. Thomas, says to her, it's not true what they're saying. And he doesn't want to be in the ER. He doesn't want any evaluation. He wants to leave. So she tells him that it's not up to him and he will do as he's directed. Never mind the risks to him if we force an evaluation on him. Never mind the fact that it's unethical and illegal to force any kind of evaluation or treatment on a competent adult. So I intervene and let everyone know, I'm the doctor in charge of that section. Speak with Mr. Thomas and let him know I'm going to discharge him from the hospital because that's what he wants. And so that's what he gets. But then my resident, Lauren, not only does she not believe that he has personal sovereignty in this way, but she also doesn't believe that I have the authority to make such a decision. So she invokes what she feels is a higher power and calls hospital administration to see if she can override my order. Of course, they tell her that no, I am correct, and she can't. And so I do discharge him. And it's really important on so many levels because we've been having this national conversation about the problems in policing, and if they're serving our best interest, and the criminalization of communities like Black and Brown communities and the violence therein. And we have those same issues in medicine that we need to address in our house.
I'm real curious. I want to get your thoughts. I want to, kind of dive a little bit deeper into that discussion too. Like, as we're seeing this pandemic unfold, and, we talk a lot about health disparities, but I mean, the disparities didn't just show up. That was driven by health, like bias, like actual kind of systemic institutional violence, right? That's happening in those spaces or in institutions like medical institutions that you work for. And so expound a little bit on that. I mean, how how pervasive is that? Because I don't feel like we're having enough of a discussion, you know, and it's hard, right? It's a real tricky balance here because medical professionals, frontline responders, they've been carrying us through the pandemic, through this pandemic moment. But I feel like, I don't know, are you saying that in your profession, in your space? Are you saying like there's kind of a reckoning happening there as well? Because before pandemic, Black people, people of color, were dealing with institutional bias or medical racism for a very long time. You know, we're having that discussion around, for example, vaccine distribution. So talk a little bit about that, because you do talk about this quite a bit in your book, but, you know, just talk about how is that reckoning happening right now, like where medical institutions are coming to grips with, hey, you know, we need to treat our Black and brown patients better, you know, when they're coming through our doors.
The discussion is starting. The discussion is starting to happen. It's not happening at a rate that it needs to. I mean, there's so much that needs to happen. Okay, so practically on the ground, I am not seeing enough of it. You know, in groups I'm part of, online, in medical communities, we're speaking about it more. You know, sadly, I'm also seeing a lot of backlash that providers are getting, that doctors are facing when they do speak up. Like, they're being fired and not promoted. So there is so much work that we have to do. You know, I spoke about an example, you know, when I talk about backlash against providers who are trying to do the work, an example in a hospital of where I was going for a promotion and I was told that I did so great in the interviews and I was super qualified. And then my director called me in and said, but you know what, they're going to leave it open. They're not going to hire you, even though you were the only applicant and very qualified. They're just kind of not going to hire anyone. And then he proceeded to tell me, but I hope you stay here anyway. It's just that this hospital won't promote people of color or women. They just don't do that. So that makes it obviously a toxic environment. Yeah. It also makes it difficult to, if that is the culture, then what is the nature of the care you expect to be given to patients? So the culture needs to change. So when I see patients, for example, I had a patient who, I'm trying to think of which example to go with. Recently, I saw a woman, she was a young Black woman, she was having chest pain and heart racing, and she was really scared. And as we're speaking, you know, she had asked a question, she was concerned also about a breast lump because it was chest pain, but then also breast. And she was saying she couldn't reach her doctor and her doctor never gets back to her. And I was explaining that, you know, from the ER perspective for the breast, we would advise you to get a mammogram, but we can't order that. And I didn't get to the next part of the conversation about how we were going to address her chest pain because she interjected and said, but this is why Black women die. And she was so afraid I was writing her off because of what she had been through, which I understood. And it was heartbreaking to me because she's right. And that has been her experience. So we did continue to speak. And I told her, I can't arrange the mammogram for you. I can give you information for a gynecologist and other primary care clinics if yours is not listening to you. But the other components of chest pain, we can evaluate that. We can make sure you're okay. And I told her about the tests. And she was very appreciative. And I'm glad that interaction went well, but it's also a problem that it was her expectation that it wouldn't, because it typically doesn't.
Yeah. You know, and that, talk some more too, expound on that about how throughout the book, you know, your work as a doctor is playing a role in helping you understand like your own healing process that you have to go through, right? You know, especially through something as very difficult as divorce. And so talk a little bit more about that. Like, it's like you're learning from your patients about spiritual and emotional healing to, to get through traumatic experiences. And so talk about how those experiences with those patients make you kind of appreciate more the healing that you have to go through.
And I do believe, I mean, that's generally my philosophy in life, that every experience and interaction, again, even if it's unpleasant, there is something to be learned from it. And a patient that comes to mind, one I called Joshua, who I was seeing in the emergency department, of course. And his studies, his CAT scan showed that he had cancer, widely metastatic cancer. And it seemed like the cancer that he was treated for decades before, his prostate cancer, had come back. And I had to deliver this information to him. And his response was of such equanimity about it. And he told me how he had lived the way he wanted to. He had this vegan diet. He enjoyed being in nature. He enjoyed his family. He was very close with his son and daughter-in-law. And he told me he didn't know if he was going to pursue any aggressive treatments. He didn't know, but he would take the information and he would allow me to make his follow-up appointments, and communicated to me that no matter what happened next, he was at peace. And I thought to myself in that moment, and clearly have never forgotten that story, because I felt like that is probably one of the most difficult moments a person can have when they have just received that kind of diagnosis. And if he could deal with it with such equipoise, then certainly I, well, to my knowledge, have my health and, shelter and food, have my basic needs met, that the difficulties I'm facing, I could handle it as well. So, so it's moments like those that are so powerful, even the quiet ones like that can really direct towards grace.
We're talking with Dr. Michelle Harper. She is author of The Beauty in Breaking, New York Times bestselling memoir. We're talking with her right now live here on the Philadelphia Citizen. If you have questions, we're just starting to prime this up for any questions, maybe any comments, maybe you'd like to share your stories as well. Maybe you've had stories similar to what's covered in, what's captured in this book, The Beauty in Breaking. Feel free to, you can leave or let us know in the Zoom group chat. So I'm watching that right now. If you have questions, please feel free to drop them there right now. We'll share them. Feel free to, and we'll maybe even bring you in. We might even have a moment where we can bring you in. You can ask Dr. Harper a question directly while we have this conversation. Once again, you can go to philadelphiacitizen.org. I'm Charles Ellison, executive producer, host of Reality Check, a daily public affairs program on WURD in Philadelphia, and occasionally I've written for the Philadelphia Citizen as well. So great to be here and talking with Dr. Harper. Doctor, that's where the divorce, that's, talk about that a bit, and because that's kind of like the spark of this journey, of this, like, that you're going through in this memoir, this very difficult journey. And so talk a bit about that, about, kind of let folks who haven't read the book, without giving away too much, how that all came into play, because it was it's something where you didn't expect it, you didn't see it coming, and it happened in a very sort of very shocking way. It reverberated for quite a long time. Talk about how you write about that. How difficult was it to write about that? I mean, I just find that anyone, when they're talking about divorce, much less writing about it, right, it's just a very difficult thing to talk about. So then you're putting it in a memoir while at the same time covering these real heady topics, like we were just talking about a few moments ago: racism, medical bias, social justice.
It was, I mean, at the time it was difficult. I mean, I feel a little guilty because now I'm over it.
You're right. And you're sharing it in a book, right?
Not that I know. At the time, it was really difficult, though.
Left that behind.
But I,
I'm done with that, right?
but, and I think I don't. And I think divorce is great, actually. So,
Wow.
I mean, I do. I mean, this is why, because I wrote, okay, so the circumstances, and I'm always going to be honest. So, whether or not I give something away, I don't know.
Okay.
I'm going to be honest.
Yeah.
And if you still want to read the book, that's fantastic.
Right.
So it was towards the end of my residency. And so I thought that we had decided to move to Philadelphia together. Actually, this was a joint decision, and I didn't know anyone in the area. I mean, my in-laws were going to be in the area, but that's it. And he knew some people in Philadelphia. And then I found out just months before residency graduation, like I can't go with you. You are on your path. I mean, it looks like you'll do well on your path, but I haven't figured out my path, he said. And he said, so if I'm with you, I'll just be thinking about the fact that you're doing well, and I won't feel like I'm doing well. So I got to sort myself out. So it's the long and short of it. Yeah. And I'm the type of person, I mean, that's very difficult. And then like in a matter of days, I had an attorney and filed for divorce because I feel like I will pick up the pieces later. And so then when I got to this new city alone, where I didn't know anyone, starting a new job at this point in my life where I thought, finally, I'd worked all this time to be an attending physician, and now we're going to have real furniture so we can buy real furniture and we'll start our lives together. And that didn't happen. So I had to figure out then, what does it mean? Like, what is the story? I had written this story in my head for myself, but what does it mean when life has other plans? So that's one of those moments of breaking, where it was the loss of dreams, the loss of stories, and then having to figure out, okay, well, what is intended for me and where do I go from there? Yeah. At the time, excruciating, and at the time, even, for years, excruciating. Years out from it, though, it was an opportunity to live I do yoga and I'm spiritual, so sorry, I'm just going to go there, to live my authentic life for which I am grateful.
Are there different stages of breaking, and then like are there even like multiple stages of putting all, I mean, in your mind, right? I mean, are there like specific stages or phases that you feel like you go through as you're breaking, and then specific phases, stages that you go through as you pick up all the pieces and put it all back together?
I think there are, I feel there are. And I feel there are times when, as we learn, it, kind of the lessons get deeper, we can go, I never really played video games so much, but we go through different challenge levels, and life said, oh, you kind of got that one. Let's bring you to the next level and see if you really got it. I mean, on the relationship topic, then after the divorce, I had a serious relationship, and I realized that, oh, this is difficult. Like some of the challenges from my childhood and witnessing abusive behavior and like being imprinted with codependence started playing out in that other relationship. And I said, wait a second, I already learned this. I thought these were lessons that I learned. And now I'm with this person who wants to start reliving his own trauma from his difficulties in childhood. And so I self-extricated. It worked out fine, but it was challenging. And I bring that up as an example of, even when we think we've learned something, there are opportunities to learn that much more. And so I guess that in that way, life in my opinion, doesn't get easier, but I think we get a little quicker on the uptake. So then it can be more fulfilling.
We have some questions for you as well, Dr. Harper. I'm going to go ahead and go to them.
Yeah.
We had Anissa Armstrong who's asking, after writing this book and doing these virtual events, have you learned anything about yourself that really surprised you?
Okay, there's a couple things. I've learned that I can accomplish even more tasks with ever diminishing amounts of time. I've learned that. And what else? I guess I've always been kind of curious and up for a challenge. And I'll be honest, like in the beginning, doing speaking and doing interviews, far more anxiety provoking. I mean, I would sooner manage a patient in cardiac arrest than have to give an interview or read part of my book out loud or give a lecture. But it's becoming easier to do that. So in that way, this path has been interesting because I'm finding out that I'm that much more courageous than I thought I was courageous before, but it's more opportunities for me to grow in that way.
Mm-hmm. What we also have Jessica Black Press. Dr. Harper, can you talk about your background and your path to becoming a physician, the experiences and people who inspired you along your journey personally and professionally? And she's also extending some thanks for your beautiful work.
Thank you. You know, I will say that initially, most of it has come from the experiences I've had as a child and being in an abusive household and feeling trapped and knowing that some way I was going to have to get out. And for me, getting out meant, all of us surviving, all of us, meaning myself, my brother, my sister, my mother, and then feeling like an autonomous adult, and there was a time when I had to take my brother to the emergency department for treatment. And that, while I was waiting for him, was one of the first times that I felt a sense of hope, where I saw different types of people converging in that space, all looking for healing. I've told this story before, whether or not it was a homeless man who just needed, pre-COVID, who could wait in the waiting room and needed just some time from the elements where he could rest, or a man who was brought in coding presumably cardiac arrest because paramedics were pumping oxygen into his lungs and thumping on his chest to circulate his blood, and then his family streaming in, and one way or another, whether or not he survives, they have to move forward. They have to go on with their lives. And so, being in that space and seeing that I wasn't alone in this desire for healing and the next steps, and knowing that as long as we made that choice and there was at least somebody there, one person, to offer assistance, whether or not it's just an ER doctor for an hour or the duration of her shift, that there was an opportunity, there was another side, there was the next day where things could be different. And so that's really what set me on this path ultimately. And were there some helpful people along the way? Sure. Like my third grade teacher, for example, who noticed that I was interested in and loved school. A teacher in medical school who had done a lot of work on intimate personal violence, and we did some projects together. There were different people, but it honestly came from my experience in childhood and decisions I made as a result.
Also, we have quite a few questions here. In fact, I'm going to go to one. I found this quite interesting. It was Nancy Morris here. She was saying, as a Caucasian woman, I was not aware of the medical community as seen by an MD of color. But I also wasn't surprised as I was in corporate America for decades. Your recollections are heartbreaking to many of us. What one initial change in the medical community, large or small, would you like to just make with your, and she puts quotes around it, magic wand?
My magic. One initial, okay. I'm just gonna start speaking. I know it's not one thing though, so I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But there's a couple things.
I would think there was a couple of things.
Right? Yeah, we need, we need it because it's about changing the culture.
Right.
Because, on one hand, I want to say we need diversity and representation, which we absolutely do. If we're 2%, I'm one of 2%. There's 2% of doctors are Black women. It's not representative. We need representation. The thing is, though, you can't bring someone in to a toxic environment and then wonder why they can't thrive, why they don't stay. So that's why it's more than representation, although representation will help with it. We need a culture where we say, and this is true for medicine, this is true for America, where we say, it is not okay to be a bigot. It's not okay. And if you are, there are consequences. And yes, we may forgive you, we may move forward, as a nation, but this may not be the job. This is not the job for you. Like, there are consequences. You can learn depending on what it is. But we have principles that we adhere to, and that is the expectation. So I think those would be the two, I'll give you two main things, but then apart from that, what also do we need? Everybody needs a living wage, access to quality education that is free, and healthcare, because getting that representation means removing the structural barriers so that we can have people participate in the field.
Mm-hmm. I think we have someone who is about to ask a question here on screen. Zachary Gekis.
Is anyone coming on screen?
I think so. I saw them for a moment, but I'm not sure. No, not at all.
No? Okay.
You have a question? I
saw
his name come up on screen, so that's why. But he is asking. He's saying, first, thanks for sharing your book with the world and your time with us tonight. He's joining us from Manayunk in Philly. I have a question about your inspirations. Who are some of the writers, thinkers that influence you most?
Audre Lorde, James Baldwin, Toni Morrison.
Yeah.
Okay, so then some contemporary. Rebecca Solnit. I started reading Caste, and that's really good too. Isabel Wilkerson in Caste. Okay, I'm gonna stop there so far.
That's a good list.
And I realize that
I'm impressed.
I will say the caveat that I tend to read nonfiction. So if I did, I know I didn't say fiction.
Right.
There are brilliant fiction writers. I just don't tend to read it as much. But no fiction writers.
Well, speaking of that, because there was a question from Josh Middleton who was saying, first he's asking, do you see yourself writing another book? And then he's also asking, would you try any other genres like fiction?
Right. I don't know if I would. I haven't really thought of that. I mean, apart from, I have some passion projects in terms of children's writings that are brewing. But apart from that, I really enjoy nonfiction for now.
Got it. So no like medical thrillers,
Not for me. I mean, and I love watching horror films and thrillers. It's terrible. Okay. It's what I love to do, like at the end of the shift at like 2 a.m. if I get home late. But
Right.
in terms of writing, no. And do I want to write more?
So
Yes.
let me ask you, I mean, have you like gone through this process now? And it seems like you're having a lot of fun on the virtual book tour, right? Is it making you think about like switching professions, like, you know, just going through the transition, right? Like,
Yeah. No, I'm not
okay,
done with medicine. I mean, there's so much more to do. And bureaucracy aside, because the
right.
bureaucracy is just a joy killer.
I can imagine. I've heard, right.
But that aside, I enjoy being a doctor. Otherwise,
Mhm,
apart from all the BS, I enjoy that part. I enjoy working in the ER and collaborating with patients and taking care of patients.
mhm.
Is there more I want to do in the literary path? Yes. Is it right now extremely difficult juggling both? Yes. So I'm gonna
Yeah,
have to figure out just how to do this moving forward.
absolutely. Absolutely. I think we have Edward Kihanya from outside of Boston, Milton, Massachusetts. Edward, you had a question.
Yay. Oh,
Can we
you're
hear you?
Yes, yes. I, hi, Dr. Harper. Nice to meet you. I, my question is, is it possible for uh, Black doctors or doctors or medical professionals or um, administrators of color to discriminate against people of color? And if so, what, from your perspective, what causes them to do that?
Mm. Well, thanks for that question, Ed.
Yeah.
That's an
Yes.
intriguing one.
Yeah. And it's an important one. And that's why I had brought up before it's about changing the culture. Um, because within the culture of medicine, does that happen? You know, are there, unfortunately, sadly, tragically, women who will discriminate against other women providers? Actually, like in the story that I told with Mr. Thomas, um, are there people of color who will do the same? Yes. And sadly, when I've seen it, it's often because they feel like they benefit from the structure, or that may be a way for them to benefit and advance their own career,
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
or maybe because, you know, this structural bigotry, whether it's racism, misogyny, the list goes on, heterosexism, it's part of what we're taught as we're growing up in society. I mean, there's part of it that we just have, like, even if it's, you know, being anti-Black as a Black person, that's what you're taught to
Mhm.
feel and believe. And until and
Wow.
unless you deconstruct it and unlearn it, then yeah, you're gonna replicate it, sadly.
Mm.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, yeah,
Thank you.
thank you for that
Thank you
question,
for
Ed.
coming on screen.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Ed. And I think that question applies to a lot of other professions, by the way.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
just something to deeply explore on. So I appreciate it. It's a tough one. It's
yeah.
an uncomfortable one, but I appreciate Ed asking it. We definitely want to, you know, tackle those issues. Once again, we're talking with Dr. Michelle Harper, "The Beauty in Breaking." That's her book. We don't know of any future nonfiction or fiction titles that are going to come out of that. I think we have a couple of more questions uh, for you, Doctor, if I'm not mistaken. And oh, it was Linda Brooks. Oh no, I'm sorry. Before I go to Linda Brooks, there was this. They're anonymous, and they're saying thank you for your lovely, beautifully written book. Can you talk about the tension between your oath to do no harm and your advice to let things break? How do you reconcile that?
Hmm. And I suppose, I think it depends on what's meant by that. I will say that I don't have any tension. I don't, the way I'm interpreting that and the way I see it, I don't feel like these are at odds.
Right.
I'm thinking of an example. You know,
Because you're using the break.
Example,
The break is like that first step in that healing process.
right. I mean, the break is what happens.
Mm-hmm.
So what can happen in life that then can create space for us to move forward? I mean, somehow we're going to have to move forward. So, for example, when a newborn is brought in to the department who is dead, the baby has passed away, but they're just brought in. So we do everything we can to see if we can bring this baby back to life.
Mm-hmm.
Put a breathing tube down, do chest compressions, give all kinds of medications, the strongest medications, to see if we can restart this infant's heart.
Mm.
We worked on this child for longer than is reasonable because it's a child, you know, and we need to feel that we as healthcare providers have done everything. When we look the family in the eyes, we need to know that we have done everything. We need them to know that there was nothing that would have reversed this medically as part of their closure. And so when the resuscitation efforts were over and I pronounced the child, and we brought in the parents, they were of course devastated. They had tried very hard for this child. There were no issues with the pregnancy or delivery. Everything was perfect. And now their perfect child was gone. And there was nothing that anyone could do in that moment except acknowledge and allow the grief. That's all. And then somehow, one day, they will need to move forward and survive this and then live. And so that's what I mean about the breaking and being there for each other and supporting each other through that and choosing healing. And so even in the most difficult circumstances, I mean, if there could be anything beautiful, and I suppose that part of it, that choice to heal, there being some kind of community to support you in that healing, I find that part beautiful. I find the fact that that family will find a path forward beautiful, and that perhaps they can help others and also rebuild their lives in a way that's fulfilling.
Mm. You know, one of the things that strikes me about your book, or what you seem to be, there's a mission in it, right? You know,
Mm-hmm.
like you really want readers to connect with the pain and the struggles and the trauma of patients that you've dealt with. You want them to say, you're trying to vividly describe, and you're trying to be as minimally clinical in doing that as you can possibly be. Like you don't want to seem like a doctor when you're describing that pain and trauma. So it's a very selfless book, I find. You know, like it's the selfless attempt at like helping people imagine and recognize the humanity of the patients. You know, because that's a big part of the problem here. Like just in society in general, we're not recognizing each other's pain and trauma. While at the same time, you're also humanizing people who are in your position. You know, you're humanizing medical professionals, humanizing doctors and nurses. And do I have that about right? I mean, that's kind of like the mission in this book.
I hope so. Yeah,
Mm.
that is my intention. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Betsy Lowe is she's also asking. She's saying she really enjoyed the book. She's excited to be here this evening. I'm wondering how you navigate working in the medical system while also following your own internal compass. How do you decide how to work within the system and when you will work outside the system to create meaningful change?
Yeah. And that is a balancing act. And that why I do yoga on a regular basis.
Right. Right.
Because it is tricky. It is. And there's a lot of speaking up and standing up. And so I have to be artful about where I choose to work. And hopefully working at places that are more aligned with that mission to take care of patients, more aligned with the mission that healthcare is what's primary. And it's, as I hear the words coming out of my mouth, it's a funny thing to say, and it's kind of sad. But unfortunately, until we change it, a lot of times in medicine, what is primary are profits. It's like a business, not the human beings. So I try to choose places where the focus is the human being. And then I try and think, well, how can I maximize the outcomes I want in terms of the mission that you stated, the mission I have for myself, right, to serve. And that's why, honestly, that I decided to write, because I feel like in the ER, we have the opportunity to potentially help one person at a time, one family, one community. But with writing, it's different. And it's been a blessing to connect with people around the world and to have these discussions on a much larger scale. So that's another way that these are some of the choices I've made to hold to my moral compass.
We had this question from Jennifer Shryak, who's saying she thinks that you're so fabulous. So I'm quoting her, and yes, she is. I believe you're an angel. What do you do besides writing your first book to guide and mentor other young women of color, young Black women like yourself, to be so courageous and strong and to achieve? Thank you for all that you do for our society. That's coming from Jennifer. So thank you for that question, Jennifer.
Thank you. That's really kind. On a practical level, when I meet people, whether it's like if we have students rotating, I will, in that moment, it's important for me to teach and interact. I mean, my team will tell you, like my publicity team will tell you that if I ever hear from students, I cannot say no. Like I have to respond to students, and they'll say, "We know you don't have time for this interview, but she wants to talk to you about a paper." And I'll say, "No, but I do have time. I'm going to do it."
See, you are an angel. I knew it.
That's really important. Oh, hi. That's really important for me, because I know that a person's whole life can change just based on one conversation, and we don't even realize it. And
I feel like you changed my life, and I wasn't even expecting this tonight, right now.
So that's why, and that's why.
Yeah, thank you for that. Did you want to add a little bit more to that, Jennifer, real quick?
Well, I just wanted to say you are so wonderful, and you're so young and you're such a fantastic, I mean, I know probably everybody tells you, you're such a fantastic role model. I just hope, but I mean, you work for an emergency room and you're a doctor and you have limited time. And so I don't even know if you have daughters or nieces or young ladies on your street who know you and see you go to work every day. But so you're just a fantastic role model. And I just wondered if you're part of any formal, and of course your book helps everybody, men, Caucasian folks, everybody. But I just didn't know if maybe you did formal things, maybe through your medical school, or like you're saying, your students and all that. But it's just, I wish there were, 100 million of you. And then the world, we would have evolved past this summer to like 100 years from now or something or whatever. Anyway, sorry, I'm laughing.
Thank you, Jennifer. No, that's all right.
Right? I mean, that's just the women.
Yeah.
You guys,
right.
I mean, what, right? Anyway.
I can't disagree. No.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you, Jennifer.
Okay.
No,
But I, you know, I will say that I find mentoring very important, and service really important.
mhm,
So for example, I heard from she's this amazing medical student who wants to go into emergency medicine, thankfully, and we would be lucky to have her just in any part of medicine, Jessica. And she had asked me to be part of a program she's doing with incarcerated women. So we've had 2 book clubs. You know, we Zoom in, and we've had book clubs with women who are part of this program. And we're supposed to continue some work together. But, you know, those are just some examples where when the opportunity presents itself, and it is increasingly, then I will take part in it, because for me, that's the whole point of doing this work. It
mm.
wouldn't make sense otherwise.
Hey, is this true? There was one of our listeners or viewers is asking. They're saying Claudia Liverett is asking. I've read that patients of women doctors have a better survival rate. Can you speak to this issue? Is that true? I haven't heard that.
Actually, I've read that too. More just so you're less likely. This is what I read. You're like less likely to die. You're less likely to have return visits for the same condition.
Okay.
So yeah, I have read those studies.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good to know. All right. Okay. Whew. Okay. I have a female doctor, so I'm okay. Sounds great. Okay.
It should be that way. Like I mean, again, this is, you know, part of addressing the issues and disparities, because everyone should be able to provide excellent care, and we need to look at why.
Should be equal across the board. Exactly. No, I definitely agree with you on that. And that's still a continuing problem. Nancy Coleman has a statement here, comment, giving some feedback. Thank you for your beautiful book. She says, your story resonated with me so personally. Even though I am a middle-aged white woman, I took great comfort and hope in your story in terms of the ways it reflects on my children. My middle daughter recently came through an abusive marriage and has gone on to success as an artist. My youngest child is a 4th-year medical student who identifies as trans non-binary and faces another kind of discrimination, but carries on. So that's thank you, Nancy, for that, for sharing that story. And Linda Brooks is also saying, thank you so much. This was a blessing. It helped me to even have a different perspective on doctors. You know, going back to that conversation we had a few moments ago about the humanization of people in your profession, Dr. Harper. And Linda goes on to say, you never know what they are going through. You just don't. So that's why it's such an important book. But go ahead if you want to respond to both those comments.
No, I will say when I don't remember when the woman brought up the difficulties her children were going through, whether it was abusive marriage or trans. I really appreciate that, because I feel that intersectionality is important.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, as I may have spoken a lot about, you know, misogyny, racism, and it goes on. You know, it's important to me also standing up for LGBTQ community. I mean, we really are all in this together for justice and equality. And I feel that we all benefit when we're treated well and equally. So I appreciate that comment deeply. Thank you.
Yeah, no. You know, it's been a great conversation, Doctor. And so you know, we don't know if there's another book project. You're thinking about a potential children's book or a series of children's book in the future. But what's anything next that's after this as you're going down this road?
Okay, so I will say I'm a little superstitious. So, and if anyone on there knows me, they know that I won't talk about something until it's done. So like this book, I wouldn't really talk about until it was sold. So I wouldn't talk about it even if I exactly knew. And there's a couple things I know, but I will say that I want to keep going. So do I want to write more books and also as another work for adults? Yes. Do I think it'd be super fun to get involved with other creative works like, I don't know, film or TV. From the writing perspective, yeah, it would be. So we'll see what happens next.
Absolutely. All right. Dr. Michelle Harper, author of The Beauty in Breaking. I have my copy. I hope you have yours too. And so I want to thank Dr. Harper for her time this evening, taking time out of a very, well, I'm sure is a very busy Zoom schedule because everything's blending into each other these days. I'm going from Zoom to Zoom. So, but you can check it out. It's Penguin Random House. I want to thank them too for making this possible.